A man beside the paint counter congratulated my husband on his 4th year of retirement. Russell was wearing the navy Midstate beverage shirt he put on every weekday morning. He had a travel mug in one hand and 2 boxes of deck screws tucked under his arm, and for a second I assumed the man had mistaken him for somebody else. Then the man said, "Russ Carver, right? Regional safety." Russell's fingers tightened around the boxes. "Carl," he said, without any pleasure in recognizing him. Carl smiled at me and held out his hand. "You must be Linda. We never met before Russ left." I shook it because my body was still following ordinary instructions. Russell had left our house for work at 7 that morning. He had returned at 5:15, changed out of the same navy shirt, and suggested we buy supplies for the loose railing on our back steps. There had been nothing retired about his day. "I'm still consulting," Russell said. Carl uses the word retirement for anybody who gets out of management. Carl's smile faltered. "Sure. I just meant the banquet and all that. 4 years goes fast." He looked from Russell to me, then added, "Is Dana still dragging you up those trails every Monday?" Russell set the screws in our cart hard enough to rattle the metal. "Different Dana." Carl opened his mouth, reconsidered, and reached into his jacket for a business card. He handed it to Russell. "Well, good seeing you. Tell the old group hello if you come to breakfast." Russell pushed the cart toward the registers before I could ask what breakfast he meant. I followed him past stacked bags of mulch and waited until we were in the truck. "How long have you been retired?" I asked. He kept both hands on the steering wheel though the engine was off. "I'm not retired the way he made it sound." "What way is that?" Midstate offered me an early pension when they consolidated safety. I took the pension and stayed on as an independent trainer. Same work, different arrangement. He looked at me then, annoyed rather than frightened. "We discussed this. We discussed a reorganization. You said your benefits moved. That is what happened. You had a retirement banquet. It was a service recognition thing. Carl likes drama." I asked who Dana was. Russell rubbed the bridge of his nose. "A woman from a hiking group. Carl met her once. I haven't seen him in years, and apparently he remembers half of everything." His answer contained enough ordinary nouns to be possible: pension, consulting, hiking group, reorganization. I wanted it to be the kind of marital confusion that embarrassed both people for an hour and disappeared after dinner. Instead, I asked to see the pension paperwork. Russell started the truck. "It's in the office somewhere. Can we not turn a random conversation at Lowe's into an audit?" The word audit was meant to make me sound unreasonable. It almost worked. At the community college, I spent my days finding the missing form or person that kept a routine decision from becoming a crisis. At home, I had let Russell handle taxes, retirement projections, and the monthly transfer into our joint checking account. He liked numbers, I liked closing my laptop after work. That division felt practical until a man at the paint counter told me my husband had retired without me. On the drive home, Russell talked about the railing. He said the bottom post had more rot than he expected and we might need a new anchor. I watched the Midstate logo fold and unfold across his shoulder as he turned the wheel. For 31 years of marriage, Russell had dressed for work before breakfast. The shirts changed from gray to navy after a company rebrand, and his title changed from route supervisor to regional safety manager, but the routine remained. He ground coffee at 6:20. He packed an apple, a turkey sandwich, and a can of sparkling water in a black insulated lunch bag. He kissed the side of my head while I read the local news and left through the garage. Even during the pandemic, Midstate kept him moving between warehouses because beverage distribution never stopped. 4 years earlier, the company had reduced its regional management staff. Russell told me he had survived the cuts by accepting a hybrid training role with fewer benefits and more local travel. His deposit into our joint account had dropped, and we adjusted. I was helping my mother recover from a stroke then. If Russell said the company had changed a payroll code, I believed him because I had medication lists taped to my refrigerator and an assisted living application open on my laptop. At home, he carried the deck screws to the garage and left Carl's business card on the workbench. He did not look for pension papers. At dinner I asked again. "Tomorrow," he said. "I have to pull an old storage box." "Why wasn't I at the banquet?" He cut a chicken breast into careful strips. "Because it wasn't a retirement party. It was cake in a break room after a reorganization, and your mother had just gone back to the hospital." That part was true. My mother had been readmitted after a medication reaction in September 4 years earlier. I had spent 3 nights in a vinyl chair beside her bed. Russell had said a safety inspection in Dayton prevented him from coming until Saturday. "Was Dana there?" I asked. His fork stopped for less than a second. "I don't remember who was there." Carl remembers. Carl also thought my consulting contract meant I had stopped working. Do you want his memory running our house now? I could feel myself being pulled toward a familiar argument in which the original question vanished and my tone became the issue. I put my fork down. "I want the pension paperwork tomorrow." Russell said fine. At 6:20 the next morning, the coffee grinder woke me. I stayed in bed and listened. Cabinet. Refrigerator. The soft rip of a paper towel. Garage door. His truck backed down the driveway at 7:03, as it had on hundreds of weekdays. I went into the kitchen. The apple bowl held one less apple. The black lunch bag was gone. If Russell had built the morning as theater, he had never missed rehearsal. Carl's card was not on the garage workbench. I found it on top of the recycling, face down beneath the hardware store receipt. I stood there long enough to know that calling him would change something even if he had made an honest mistake. Then I dialed. Carl answered on the 3rd ring. I introduced myself and said I was not asking him for gossip. My husband and I were planning our retirement, I explained, and I needed to understand what he had meant. Carl went quiet. "Russ didn't tell you? Tell me what you know firsthand." I heard a chair scrape on his end. He said Midstate had offered Russell a full early retirement package during the consolidation. Russell's last day as an employee was September 30th, 4 years and 2 months earlier. Carl had attended the luncheon. About 40 people were there. Russell made a short speech about finally having control of his weekdays. Did he introduce a woman named Dana? I asked. Carl exhaled. He brought her. I thought you two were already separated. My hand closed around the edge of the workbench. Why? He said you had moved to Arizona to help your mother and that the legal part was taking time because of the house. Dana sat with him. People assumed. Linda, I'm sorry. I wouldn't have said anything yesterday if I understood. My mother had never lived in Arizona. She had spent her entire life within 40 miles of Columbus. Do you have anything from the luncheon? I asked. Carl said the company newsletter was still online. He texted me a link while we were on the phone. I did not open it until we hung up. The article was short. After 35 years, Russell Carver starts his next route. There were 3 photographs. In the first, Russell stood beside a sheet cake decorated like a highway sign. In the second, he shook hands with the vice president of operations. In the third, he had one arm around a woman in a green sweater. She was not touching him like a coworker. Her hand rested flat against the center of his chest, and Russell's face had the loose, unguarded look he used to have in vacation photographs before he began saying he hated cameras. The caption named her, Russell with longtime friend Dana Morris. The date was the Thursday my mother returned to the hospital. I had texted Russell that afternoon to ask whether he could leave Dayton early. He had replied, "Wish I could. Inspector is still here. Call me after the doctor rounds." I sat on the concrete step between the garage and kitchen and read that message in our old thread. I did not need a search of his phone. I already had a public photograph and a lie addressed directly to me. What I did not have was an explanation for 4 years of weekday departures. I called our tax preparer's office. Russell and I had used the same firm for 12 years, and both our names were on the engagement letters. After verifying my identity, the receptionist uploaded copies of our last 5 joint returns to the client portal. She did not answer questions about Russell, She simply gave me documents I was entitled to receive. The change appeared on the second return. Mid-state wages ended. A pension distribution began. There was also modest self-employment income under Russell's name, enough to support occasional consulting but nowhere near a full-time salary. I remembered signing each return electronically on my phone. Russell would point to the refund or amount due, tell me the preparer had checked everything, and hold the screen while I tapped. I had not been tricked by fine print. I had chosen not to read a page that belonged to both of us. That mistake did not create his lie, but it had given the lie a quiet place to live. The bank statements were simpler. Before the consolidation, deposits carried Mid-State's payroll name. Afterward, the monthly money arrived as transfer from our Carver CU. The amounts changed slightly, and I had accepted Russell's explanation that contract work paid unevenly. I could not see the credit union account itself, and I did not try to enter it. I made a list of what I knew and what I did not. Russell had retired. He still did some consulting. His pension flowed first through an individual account. He transferred part of it into our household. He left our home dressed for a job he no longer held. Dana had attended his retirement luncheon as his partner while his coworkers believed I lived in Arizona. At 11:40, an unfamiliar number called me. A woman said, "Carl Benton gave me your name. He said you had questions about Russell." Her voice was cautious, almost formal. "Is this Dana?" I asked. "Yes." There was a pause. "Before we talk, I need to know something. Are you back from Arizona for good?" I looked through the kitchen window at the loose railing Russell and I had planned to fix together. "Dana," I said, "I have never lived in Arizona. Russell and I shared breakfast yesterday. He left this house for work this morning." The line stayed open, but for several seconds neither of us made a sound. Dana asked me to repeat what I had said. I did. She asked whether Russell and I were legally married. 31 years in June, I said. We live in the same bedroom. 2 weeks ago we had dinner for our anniversary. Dana made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "He was with me the afternoon of your anniversary. He said he was helping Emily choose a new water heater. Emily was our 28-year-old daughter. Her water heater was 3 years old." I told Dana that, and another silence opened. She said she could not have the rest of the conversation by phone. We agreed to meet at a diner near the Outer Belt that afternoon. Before hanging up, I asked one question. "How long?" 5 years and 8 months, she said. "But he told me you had been separated before I met him." I arrived early and chose a booth where neither of us would have to sit with our back to the room. Dana came in wearing a green raincoat, not the green sweater from the retirement photograph, though my mind tried to make them the same. She was 56, a retired middle school art teacher with silver threaded through dark hair and a careful way of watching my face before she spoke. She did not look ashamed. She looked furious and unconvinced. "I need to see something current," she said after we ordered coffee. I showed her the anniversary photograph Emily had taken at a neighborhood Italian restaurant. Russell's arm was around my chair. On my phone, beneath the picture, was his message from the next morning, 31 down. "Still my best decision." Dana looked at it, handed the phone back, and took her own phone from her purse. She showed me photographs without giving me the device. Russell hiking beside her in Hocking Hills. Russell repainting her kitchen. Russell wearing a paper crown at her 55th birthday. In one, he stood in Dana's driveway beside a folding table covered with trail maps. A handwritten sign said Russ and Dana, Monday crew. The dates went back years. "He told me you came back from Arizona after your mother entered assisted living," Dana said. "He said the divorce was on hold because you couldn't afford 2 homes yet and because you would lose part of your college pension if you filed before your next service mark. My pension vested 12 years ago." Her eyes narrowed. "He said you slept separately." "We don't." "He said he used the guest room." "Our guest room has been my sewing room since Emily moved out." Dana pushed her coffee away. "So every single part is a lie." I wanted to say that the relationship was real even if its terms were false, but I had no generosity for definitions yet. I asked what Russell did at her house all day. Dana said he arrived between 7:15 and 7:30 most weekdays. He changed out of the mid-state shirt in her laundry room, although she had argued with him about continuing the performance. They walked on Mondays with a volunteer trail crew. On Tuesdays and Thursdays he took legitimate short consulting jobs or helped at the county tool library. Other days they ran errands, cooked lunch, worked on her house, or simply stayed together. Around 4:30 he put the navy shirt back on and drove home. He kept jeans, hiking boots, a shaving kit, and an old guitar at Dana's house, but no mail and no legal documents. Overnight trips happened under cover of real consulting work, perhaps 10 or 12 nights a year. You knew he dressed as if he still worked full-time, I said. I knew he was avoiding conflict with the woman he said was his estranged wife. I did not like it. I also believed the marriage had ended before me. Didn't it bother you that I was still making his dinner? Dana's face hardened. Did it not bother you that your husband never brought you to a retirement party? The question landed because it was fair and cruel at the same time. I said yes, it bothered me now. It should have bothered me then, if I had known the party existed. Dana looked toward the window. I shouldn't have said that. But you did. Yes. We sat with the difference between being deceived and being innocent. Dana had accepted a story that allowed Russell to return to my house every night. I had accepted bank transfers and work shirts that allowed him to leave it every morning. Neither fact made us equally responsible for what he built. It did keep us from becoming instant friends. Dana said the relationship began 8 months before Russell retired. They met when she volunteered at a workplace art auction for a local youth center. Russell told her he and I had been separated inside the house for over a year. His retirement was supposed to be the moment he stopped organizing his life around Midstate and began making an honest plan with her. Instead, after the luncheon, he said my mother's illness made immediate divorce unnecessarily harsh. A year later, he said selling the house during rate increases would damage both of us. Then he said my pension date was close enough that waiting was the decent choice. Every delay sounded temporary when he explained it, Dana said. I thought retirement was the last delay. She unlocked her phone again and showed me a photograph of the retirement cake. Beside the paper highway sign, someone had placed a small card in Russell's handwriting. Next route, oh yours. Dana said he had given it to her after the luncheon. I remembered Russell coming to the hospital that Saturday with a vending machine coffee and complaining that the Dayton inspection had run late. My mother's speech had been slurred from medication. He sat beside her for 20 minutes and held her hand. Both scenes had happened in the same week. I could not make one erase the other, and I hated that my mind tried. He told me he could not take Tuesday off when my mother was discharged, I said. I used all my personal leave because he said the new role was too unstable. Dana covered her mouth briefly. He was at my house that Tuesday. We installed shelves in the garage. She did not offer the detail as proof. It escaped, and we both wished it back. My phone vibrated on the table. Russell had texted, training ran long. Home by 6, Dana saw his name. He's here, she said. Not inside. He left an hour ago for a consulting visit in Newark. He said he'd go home from there. I asked Dana not to contact him until I had spoken with a lawyer and decided where I would sleep. She agreed. Then she picked up her phone. What are you doing? I can't let him go home and lie to you for another night. I asked you to wait. You get to go home and decide what this means. I've spent 5 years hearing later. I need 1 hour before he starts calling and explaining. She looked at the screen. I already sent it. Russell called before her phone reached the table. Dana declined it. Mine rang next. I turned it face down. What did you write? That I'm sitting with Linda, who has never lived in Arizona. Her voice shook on my name. I'm sorry. I understood why she sent it. I was still angry that she had decided for both of us. I paid for my coffee and left. Russell called 6 times while I drove to my sister Nina's house. At a red light, a message appeared on the dashboard, Dana is confused. Please come home before this gets uglier. I read the message twice. Even now, Dana was confused and I was making things ugly. Russell was still the reasonable one. My hands stopped shaking. I called Nina hands-free and asked if I could stay that night. I told her not to call Russell and not to call Emily. Are you safe? She asked. Yes. Then come here. Russell's truck was in our driveway when I passed the house to collect a bag. I kept the engine running and called him from outside. He came to the front door still wearing the Midstate shirt. You went behind my back to Dana, he said before I got out. You retired 4 years ago. I consult. You change clothes at her house and come home in a uniform. He stopped arguing long enough to decide how much I knew. Dana is upset because I have been trying to end things responsibly. 5 years and 8 months. Come inside. No. Linda, the neighbors can hear you. We were speaking at normal volume. I looked at the identical windows on either side of our street and realized how often the possibility of an audience had been enough to lower my voice. Put a week's clothes and my medication in the blue suitcase, I said. Set it on the porch. Do not touch the folders on my desk. He stared at me. You're leaving our house because a bitter woman showed you pictures. I'm leaving tonight because I cannot tell which answer you are preparing. 20 minutes later, he set the suitcase outside. He had packed 3 sweaters I never wore and forgotten the medication. I retrieved that myself while he stood in the kitchen insisting that his pension was not hidden because it appeared on our taxes. I said the pension was not the only thing he had hidden. He followed me to the hallway. Dana knew I was married. She knew a version in which I lived in Arizona. She knew it was complicated. Complicated isn't the word for inventing a state I never lived in. He reached for my suitcase, perhaps to help, perhaps to stop me. I pulled it away. He let go, and I carried the suitcase to the car myself. At Nina's, I slept for 3 hours. The next morning I met with a family law attorney recommended by a colleague. She did not tell me whether to divorce Russell. She explained what I could protect without pretending I owned everything: redirect my paycheck to an individual account, preserve copies of joint records, avoid draining or freezing shared funds, and request full disclosure through ordinary process if I filed. She also explained that a pension started during a marriage was not made private simply by routing it through an individual account. The exact division would depend on the plan, state law, and any settlement. I left with a list shorter than the one in my head. Dana emailed that afternoon. The subject line read one document he showed me. Attached was a photograph of a benefit estimate Russell had used while describing their future. Most of the page was ordinary pension language. Near the bottom, under the joint and survivor option he had elected at retirement, was my full name. Dana wrote that Russell had told her the designation was temporary and could become hers after our divorce. She had accepted that because he said the divorce would follow his retirement. Then retirement happened, and the promised filing moved to my mother's recovery, the housing market, and finally my own retirement. My name did not make the page romantic. It made the future Russell had sold Dana impossible on his timeline. Retirement had not forced him to choose, it had given him more hours and a new account with which to avoid choosing. I printed the page and added it to the folder for Friday. Dana called once more that evening. She said Russell had come to her house after I left the diner and tried to explain that I was technically telling the truth but had misunderstood our marriage. He said we shared a room because my mother sometimes stayed with us, which was false, and that our anniversary dinner had been for Emily's benefit, though Emily lived across town and had gone home before dessert. Dana asked him when he had last told me the marriage was over. Russell would not give her a date. She asked when he had filed anything. He said paperwork was not the same as truth. I told him not to come back, Dana said. That is between you and him, I replied. I did not thank her. She had knowingly helped him stage his workday, and I was not ready to turn new information into absolution. She did not ask me to. I just wanted you to know where he can't stay, she said. Russell sent me a long message around midnight. He described the retirement as a private decision about dignity after Midstate pushed him out. Dana, he wrote, had become important during a period when I was unavailable. He insisted he had never intended to leave me without financial security. The message contained no sentence saying he had ended the affair. It contained no answer to where he had gone each morning. I replied with 3 lines, "I will come home Friday at 6. Nina will be in the living room. I need truthful answers about dates, money, health risk, and housing. If you cannot do that, communicate through counsel." On Friday, the navy shirts were hanging in the laundry room, washed and evenly spaced as if nothing had happened. I left them there. Nina sat on the living room couch with a book and told Russell she would not join the conversation unless I asked. He called her presence humiliating. "Then imagine she is a neighbor who can hear us," I said. We sat at the kitchen table. Russell had placed the pension estimate, 3 years of consulting invoices, and a yellow legal pad in front of him. He began by saying he had not committed financial fraud. "I didn't ask whether you committed fraud," I said. "Are you retired from Midstate?" "Yes." The word came out reluctantly, as though retirement were something I had forced him to admit before he was ready. "Date." He gave it. It matched Carl's. "When did it start?" "Linda, there wasn't one clean dash, month and year." He looked at the legal pad as if the date might be negotiable. "March. The year before I retired. 5 years and 8 months. I tried to keep my questions in order and failed. Had there been anyone else? Had Dana entered our house? When had it become physical? Was there a health risk? Russell answered out of sequence, "No one else, never in our house, physical before retirement." Then objected when I asked about money. "I transferred more than enough into the household every month." That is not an answer. Russell said his pension and consulting income entered the credit union account. He transferred a set amount for our mortgage, bills, savings, and ordinary spending. He considered what remained his because retirement was his benefit. He paid for meals, weekend trips, equipment, and some repairs at Dana's house from that remainder. He estimated $30,000 over the full relationship, then lowered it to 25 when I wrote the number down. "Then I'm not arguing about your estimate tonight. We'll get the statements." "You make that sound like a threat. Call it whatever you want." He rubbed both palms over his face. I asked why he wore a Midstate shirt. He said he sometimes visited active warehouses and needed to look credible. 5 mornings a week. It stopped you asking where I was going. It was the cleanest answer he gave. I asked what he had told Dana about our marriage. Russell said she understood that we were emotionally separated. She understood I lived in Arizona. That was shorthand for a state I have never lived in. Your life was with your mother. Mine wasn't. I had expected blame. I had not expected him to say it so plainly. For 3 years after my mother's stroke, I arranged appointments, insurance calls, and visits with Nina while working full-time. Russell came when invited and complained when plans changed. I had called that imbalance exhaustion. He had called it permission. "You were retired when she came home from the hospital," I said. "You said you couldn't take one Tuesday off. You and Nina had it handled. You were installing shelves at Dana's. I did not know that was the day Dana told you about. It was the day my mother needed help getting from a wheelchair into my car." Russell looked toward the living room. "This is exactly why I didn't tell you. Every hour I had would have become something I owed." I stood so quickly that the table knocked the wall. In the laundry room, I pulled the navy shirts from the rod hard enough to snap the hangers together. I carried the armful into the kitchen and dropped it over his papers. One sleeve knocked coffee across the pension estimate. Russell jerked the paperwork away, and the estimate tore at the staple. I heard Nina close her book in the living room, but she did not come in. For one ugly second, I was glad. Then I grabbed a dish towel and pushed it toward Russell. "You were free," I said. "You knew you were free, and you let me keep planning around a job you had already left." Russell lifted the wet shirt. "You're acting like the shirt is the marriage. It isn't. It's just the lie I watched you put on every morning. Dana and I were not married." "Fine. She got your weekdays. I got you home in time for dinner. What did you think was supposed to happen? He gathered the damp papers without answering. My hands shook too hard to help him. I sat down again. What were you waiting for? Russell said he wanted my mother settled, then the housing market improved, then my own retirement close enough that I would not panic about money. He claimed he planned to tell me the following spring. I reminded him Dana had heard the same promise tied first to his retirement. Plans change, he said. The reason changed. The waiting didn't. He looked at me for a long time. I loved different things in each life. Were you ever going to tell either of us before one of us caught you? He looked down at the wet papers instead of answering. I told him I needed 30 days of physical separation and complete financial disclosure. The house belonged to both of us, so I did not order him out. I said I would stay with Nina if he refused to leave, but we would not continue sharing a bedroom. Russell complained that Dana had shut her door and his brother's condo was small. He seemed to hear the absurdity only after the words were out. I'll call Mark, he said. His brother lived 20 minutes away. We agreed Russell would take clothes and medication that night, return for other property by arrangement, and continue paying ordinary household expenses until council established temporary terms. He wanted me to promise that separation was not a decision. I told him it was already a decision, just not every decision. At 7 the next morning, I stood in the garage while he loaded 2 plastic bins into his truck. He was wearing a gray sweatshirt. The black lunch bag sat on a shelf beside the recycling, empty. Russell looked at it, then at me, and left it there. When the garage door opened, he drove away without pretending he was going to work. Emily received the facts that affected her. Her father had retired 4 years earlier, had maintained another relationship for more than 5 years, and had used family explanations that were false. I did not show her Dana's photographs or ask her to test old alibis. She asked for a week without either parent managing her response, then set her own terms for contact with Russell. Russell and I used short emails for the mortgage, utilities, and house access. After 10 days he asked to return because Mark's condo was crowded. I kept the 30-day arrangement. Temporary terms followed, Russell rented a furnished apartment, and I returned to the house. The black lunch bag remained on the garage shelf. I left it there. My medical tests came back clear. Disclosure took months. Russell's credit union statements showed pension deposits, irregular consulting checks, household transfers, and roughly $41,000 in spending connected to Dana over 5 years. There was no secret house, second pension, or hidden mountain of debt. The returns were accurate. I had not read the columns while Russell lied about what they meant. The pension, survivor option, retirement accounts, and house equity became parts of one negotiated settlement. My planned retirement moved back 2 semesters after the house sale changed my budget. That delay hurt more than the spending total. Money could be divided. The weekdays I had planned around his non-existent job could not. Some nights I missed the man who made eggs on Sundays and knew which side of the bed kept my back from hurting. On those nights I made eggs for dinner and hated that I knew exactly how he salted them. By morning I still wanted the divorce. 31 years had not become fake, they had become something I could no longer use as proof of the present. Dana ended the relationship. We did not become friends. Russell proposed separate bedrooms, transparent accounts, and a written weekday schedule. You'd know where I was, he said. I told him I was not leaving because I had lacked Tuesday's address. I was leaving because he had used 4 years of Tuesdays without asking. The divorce was completed 13 months after the hardware store conversation. Russell kept his lawful share of the retirement assets, continued occasional consulting, and moved near Mark. Dana did not resume the relationship. Carl apologized once for the paint counter mistake. I told him he had nothing more to explain. The house went on the market in early spring. On the last day before closing, Russell and I met there with our moving lists. The rooms echoed, and small marks showed where our furniture had protected the walls from sunlight. We moved through separate areas without speaking much. In the garage, Russell took his tools, the remaining deck screws, and 2 plastic bins. He left the black lunch bag on the shelf. Do you want that? I asked. He looked at it for a while. No. Then put it in your trash pile. You can throw it away. I carried it to the trash pile, stopped, and brought it back. No. You decide. I held the bag out. Russell took it. The zipper was open, and an old paper napkin had worked into the lining. He folded the bag flat and placed it in a bin without another argument. Before leaving, he touched the loose back railing. We had never repaired it. The buyer's inspector flagged this, he said. I know. The repair credit is in the closing statement. He nodded and took his hand off the railing. I locked the front door and gave the key to the agent. My new place was a 2-bedroom condo 11 minutes from my mother's assisted living community and 15 minutes from campus. It did not have a garage. For the first month, I woke whenever a vehicle started in the parking lot below. My body had learned Russell's departure as a time signal. Eventually the sound separated into other people's lives, a nurse ending night shift, a parent taking a child to school, a delivery driver warming an engine. I did not need to know where each person was going. Working 2 more semesters felt different from the punishment I expected. My colleagues knew my actual retirement date. My supervisor stopped assigning projects beyond it. I trained my replacement in stages and showed her the shortcuts I had once treated as proof that nobody could manage without me. On my last Friday, the college held a breakfast in a meeting room near the library. There was sheet cake, because apparently every institution believed a sheet cake could explain 30 years. Nina brought my mother. Emily arrived late with flowers and sat beside them. Nina moved a chair so my mother could sit beside Emily. My supervisor read a short list of things I had done, including several I had forgotten. When she asked whether I wanted to speak, I thanked the people in the room and said I was glad my replacement had already changed one of my old procedures. That was all. Russell sent a card through Emily. She asked before giving it to me. He had written, I hope this day is exactly what you chose. I read the sentence once, slid the card back into its envelope, and placed it with the others. Then I took my mother home after the breakfast. The following Monday, I woke at 6:20 before the alarm I had forgotten to cancel. For years, that minute had meant the coffee grinder, the lunch bag, and the first movement toward the garage. In the condo, the kitchen was quiet. I turned the alarm off instead of setting it for Tuesday. At 9, I picked up my mother and drove us to a diner she liked. She insisted on telling the waitress that her daughter had finally retired, as if the woman might otherwise miss an important local announcement. I know, Mom, I said. You were at the breakfast. I'm practicing, she said. The waitress laughed and told me congratulations. I thanked her. Then I set my phone beside the sugar jar and asked my mother whether she wanted pancakes.